Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
RJ. Today is a podcast of firsts. Now, it's obviously not the first episode of the Deep Dive. We're actually on episode 59, which is kind of incredible. We've been doing this for so long now. But this is an episode of many other firsts. All right, it was the first ever game for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Can't speak this morning. It's very early, I guess. So first game for the Firebirds. That was really awesome. That was yesterday. They got another one coming up today, and then it was also the first games of the Kraken's second season. First games where they could score like multiple power plays and the power play looks dangerous. First game for Shane Wright in there. That's another first. And a first for this podcast. Like I said, it wasn't the first episode, but this is our first episode brought to you all by Queen Anne Beer Hall.
Yes. Thank you, Queen Anne Beer Hall, our sponsor. I'm happy to have them on board, part of the ECH community. We talked about them on a few post-game lives already. But yeah, they really stepped up and are helping us be able to do what we do. And I want to mention too, we'll get into the three games in a little bit, but for that first game, we had our first kind of, little watch party at Queen Anne Beer Hall. Really fun time. I mean, thanks to everyone who showed up and made it such an awesome night. But it's a great place to watch a hockey game. I mean, if you're ever considering going somewhere, you're around the arena for a game, stop by Queen Anne Beer Hall. And it's not just, the hockey, the atmosphere. By the way, they always put the game on the TV. I know other bars, maybe sometimes, they won't put the hockey game on. You never have to worry about that at Queen Anne Beer Hall. And right now they also have a really cool Oktoberfest menu, because I went there early for dinner before this because I wanted to try some of the food and to be able to let you know about it. Absolutely recommend the Oktoberfest menu while they have it. I got the schnitzel, really, really good. They also have like a sausage platter, Weisswurst, bratwurst, all this great stuff. I mean, something I'm sure Philip Grubauer would love. It makes him feel like home. But yeah, definitely go check that out. And yeah, go Queen Anne Beer Hall. Thank you to them for sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and transition now into breaking down some of those firsts that we talked about. I guess let's start with the three games, and we'll kind of go through the summary of those three games, kind of what our main takeaways were for each game, and then we can talk about like the larger takeaways for the Kraken season so far, and talk about some of the storylines that developed, because boy, were there a couple that really popped up. So opening night against the Ducks in Anaheim. This was a game that there were so many positives. Power play goes 3 for 5. You get Shane Wright in there for the very first time. The new additions all show up as you get a goal from Burakovsky, goal from Bjorkstrand. You get the first point as a Kraken from Justin Schultz. A couple of them actually even, and this, lots of good stuff. Matty Beniers gets his first goal of the season day one, so we don't have to worry about that. It's his first multi-point game ever, I believe. So that, lots and lots of positive stuff. However, I think the main takeaway we all have was just kind of the bitter taste in our mouths of the Kraken kind of constantly building up leads only to then give it away, ultimately ending in the Ducks taking it in overtime. I guess we can, say there was marked improvement in the sense that the Kraken were at least able to get a point out of it. That's, something they weren't able to really do last season. But it was just this story of, we get one, I guess it started with allowing the first goal less than a minute into the game. That wasn't great. But then it's, build up a 3-1 lead, kind of let that, turn into a 3-2 lead, but then you get a 4-2 lead, and then you just kind of watch that evaporate too until the game's tied and overtime's forced. I don't know. I still don't entirely know what the main takeaway should be from this game. Like I said, there's all those positives, and the team looked so much better than they did really at any point last season throughout the course of this game. But at the same time, Grubauer had some rough spots there, didn't, come up with a save when he needed to. The team didn't really understand how to play with a lead at all. I don't know. How should Kraken fans be feeling after that one?
I think you really have to split it up into kind of two takeaways because it really was a tale of almost two halves of the game. And each one of them told us something different. And I think both of those still ring true. That the first kind of half of the game where they looked really good and they built up that lead, I think certainly by the eye test, you can tell this is a different team than it was last year.
Mhm.
There is more skill, and that is apparent. And it's not even close. And it gives them the opportunity to play really fast and to just outplay certain teams like the Ducks in the way that they did. I mean, the Kraken set a franchise record for most shots on goal in this game,
Yep.
and it wasn't just throwing every puck to the net; it was getting legitimately good scoring chances. So I think that tells you that this team has more skill, they have more potential, they have more ability than they did last year, and that is just something that's true. Um, I think the second half of the game tells you that there's still a lot to work on, and there's still a lot of problems, potentially there. And I think, some of that is translating that skill from being on paper to executing in games and executing in the right moments. We can call it different things. We can talk about coaching maybe later on in this, but that's something that they still need to work on and that still needs improvement. I think both of those things can be true at the same time. And as we get into these later two games, I think both of those things really expose themselves too in the next couple games.
Yeah, I agree. And, a large part of that game was also John Gibson for the Ducks just looking fantastic. He kept his team in it all throughout. The Kraken did everything they could. Anytime you're getting over 40 shots or whatever, right? Like you're doing everything right at that point. You're doing everything you possibly can. If the opposing goalie is just going to step up and have a night the way John Gibson did and keep his team in it and try to, do everything in their power to give his team life, you just kind of have to at some point, acknowledge that, hey, that sometimes happens in this league and there's nothing you can kind of do against it. You know what
Right.
I
That's
mean?
one of the characteristics of hockey, and it's something that Chris Drieger brought up when we were talking to him a couple weeks ago, about his charity and everything, and why he wanted to be a goalie, and what the appeal of the position is that just some nights, if you are really on your game, it doesn't matter what anyone else does. You can just steal a game. And that's just something about hockey, something about goaltending, and unfortunately, the Kraken had it happen to them in their opening game.
Yes. So that was opening night, disappointed you don't get the 2 points for the win after the game that you played most of the way. But, again, consolation is you do get that third point out of it. Again, that's something this team was not very good at doing last year when they struggled, particularly if they were going to struggle in the second half of a game. Just getting into overtime, just getting a point. Again, big improvement for them. And then you go the next night into Los Angeles, into the great crypto.com arena, and you get to go play a Kings team that, some new additions to them, big shuffling of their lines and stuff, and they're still trying to figure things out, and you're able to take advantage of that with a really stellar performance from Martin Jones, and then just again a cohesive team that really had a plan for this game. I don't know that there was so much a plan for that game against the Ducks. It was more so just like, hey, let's go out there and let's play hockey and let's rely on our depth over theirs because they're not a very deep team right now. The game plan against the Kings was very clearly we're going to outmuscle them. Or, I mean, we'll try to outmuscle them. We're going to be physical. We're going to hit a bunch. We're going to finish our checks. We're going to make sure that if they're going to take any bit of ice against us, it's going to come at a cost. And the plan works perfectly.
It did, and the Kings were kind of unprepared for it. It looked like. I think they maybe expected more of what we saw from the Kraken, the previous night in Anaheim, where they tried to play kind of more of a speed game and outskill the other team. And I think it was a big bounce back game, and in that also they learned from their mistakes too. The Kraken went into the third period with a 3-1 lead, with that two-goal lead, and they kept their foot on the gas and they did not let the Kings back into the game at all.
Yeah.
They learned pretty much directly from their lessons in the previous game, and it seemed like, as far as the preparation, as far as the coaching, as far as the players stepping up when they needed to and doing all the right things, it felt like, okay, this team has really turned a corner here, and they can kind of finally use that skill advantage and be disciplined and win these types of games by showing up prepared, and and basically by learning from their mistakes.
Yeah.
So it gave a nice sense of optimism after this one.
Yeah, and this was also just a game that, it was good to see that the Kraken can do this. They can play like this. They can play physical. They can outmatch a team that traditionally is known for playing physical themselves. You know what I mean? Like you can take that to them. This was a game that was, there was a fight. There was lots of post whistle skirmishes, a post game skirmish. There, Jonathan Quick having to be held back and everything. It was one of those testy affairs. You got a grand total of 11 power play opportunities split between these two teams. You know what I mean? So it was nice to see that the Kraken could play a game like that. That they could not only play a game like that, but actually kind of dominate a game like that as they win 4-1, right? That's again something I feel like wasn't really in their repertoire last season. There was no way
And I think
last
it,
season they could
yeah.
have done this.
And I think it kind of flipped the script from a lot of games last
Hmm.
season where we saw the Kraken get kind of frustrated at times. It just by being out muscled, by having to deal with physical play on the other side. And in this case, they frustrated the Kings. They made life hard on all of their players. I think back to this play that I think kind of defined that element for me, where Adrian Kempe of the Kings, enters, gets the blue line, but then just dumps the puck in. He was never trying to make a hockey play. He just wants to chip this puck in and go get a change. And Will Borgen lays him flat out on his back, just gives
Hmm.
him a shove right as he dumps the puck in. I mean, you get nothing, without having to you get down on the ice. I mean, and I thought Borgen had a great game in this one. I think his name deserves to be mentioned. He was in a few of those little scrums there too, in those skirmishes. But that was kind of all game for the Kraken, where they didn't give the Kings an inch every time they wanted to get any kind of position on the ice. They had to take some contact for it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you finish it all off with an Adam Larson short-handed empty net goal, which is, as we all know, the best way to end a hockey game. So, at this point, right, 2 games into the season, 2 days into the season for the Kraken, they've accumulated 3 out of 4 possible points, all in division, on the road to kick off the season, like I said. I'm feeling like this team is completely different than last year. The new additions, they all look really solid. You got another power play goal in this one. Matty Beniers picks up another point. He's arrived. He's just going to be a point per game guy, right? Like everybody, we are all riding the high of what this is. I know a lot of people in that game focused on the Shane Wright being a scratch. Don't worry, we're definitely getting to that once we're done with these kind of summaries. But I was just like, you know what? This team has really turned things around. And all of the stuff we kind of talked about last week of, hey, what would it take to maybe make the playoffs? Like, is there playoff upside here? I kind of could see if these things all go right, this being a playoff team. Well, everything was looking like it was going right through those first 2 games. And then you get back to Seattle. You go into Climate Pledge Arena to kick things off there, your home opener. You get the new pregame show and everything, which is uploaded to our YouTube channel. Everybody can go check that out if you weren't able to see it. Thankfully, ESPN Plus had it for all of us not in the area. We were all able to see it. That was like mind blowing and incredible. But you go into this game against Vegas. It's a team that you struggled with last year. This is fan bases that don't really like each other very much right now. Both the new kids on the block, both kind of fighting for the attention of that, right? And there's no like good way of putting it, but the Kraken just dropped the ball on this game hard. It was terrible, and it looked like unfortunately, all too many Kraken games from last season.
Yeah, it really did. 100%. I dropped the ball is a good way to describe. I mean, they just didn't show up is another way,
Yeah,
that I've thought of it. They just did not show up to play. I mean, when you allow a goal in the first 12 seconds on a play where I've tried analyzing this so many times. I'm like, okay, first TV timeout. I'll go back and take a look and see what happened. I first intermission, I went back, took another look. I had nothing. There were
there is
so many
nothing.
different things going wrong, that I couldn't pinpoint anything.
Yeah, no, there is nothing. That was absolutely atrocious. Just from, how they play in the neutral zone for the like 3 seconds that the puck is actually there, to the uh I guess they were trying to continue what they were doing in the Kings game, where it's, hey, let's try to be physical and let's try to physically dominate them and finish checks, but instead you have just a bunch of guys clump up. They're all trying to finish checks on guys. It's pulling them way out of position. And then you get Keegan Colasar coming in and Carson Soucy. This is the one that's the hardest thing for me to understand. And it's literally impossible for me to understand. The other stuff I can understand. They were all trying to be physical, set a tone early, finish checks, it pulls them out of position. All right, I at least like there's a rationale for that. Why Carson Soucy continues to just drift backwards as Keegan Colasar gets the puck, enters the slot, and just walks in on a poor Martin Jones, who is completely helpless in this situation. I don't understand. All Carson Soucy had to do was put his foot in the ground, put his skate in the ice, however you want to call it, and step up. He's got a long reach, he's got a long stick. Use your stick. Try to disrupt Keegan Colasar there. Try to poke the puck away. Get physical with him. Again, at this point, you might as well get physical with him. He's walking right in on your goaltender at point blank range. This is the time to just go for the big hit and try to finish your check if there ever was one. Instead, he just literally drifts past and lets Colasar have just a wide open look at the net. I just don't get it. I literally can't think of any reason for him to do that.
I can't either. I mean, I'm I'm with you. I've tried to figure this out. Yeah, it's just baffling. And so that's the first goal, and then they give up another goal on a on a similarly bad looking
Yep.
play. 3 minutes later, basically, and now you're down 2-0, and you're down 2-0 very early.
Mm-hmm.
But as anyone who's watched some NHL hockey knows, that doesn't mean the game is over. That is a deficit that you can overcome.
What's the most
And
dangerous lead in hockey?
2-0,
goals.
two
Yeah.
goal lead, two
Yeah.
goal lead. It's and especially early in a game when there's plenty of time. So they settled things down a little bit toward the middle of the period. At the end of the period, they kind of loosened up again and gave a few more good chances. But they get to the first intermission, and this is what's worrying to me because bad starts happen for every team. It happened for the Kraken more than most last season, so that's a little worrying. But what's most worrying for me is have that first intermission to kind of settle down, reset, to learn from their mistakes and maybe implement some changes. And they come out for the second period, and it is one of the worst, if not the worst, period of Kraken hockey that they've ever played.
Yeah.
It is that bad. Odd man rush after odd man rush after odd man rush, breakaway after breakaway, and just feeding the Golden Knights transition. All three Kraken forwards, it's one thing, we're trying to be aggressive. We're down in the game, jumping up, getting a little aggressive. But you'd think after the fourth, after the fifth breakaway against odd man rush, you would make some kind of adjustment that the forwards would realize, okay, this is not working for us. We can't continue to trade chances with them like that. Not even trade chances because you're not getting chances yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It was just awful, just an awful period of hockey. I think the Kraken were lucky that Vegas only scored 3 in that period.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about it. Dylan, I mean, help me out here.
Yeah, it was just, hey, Vegas, you wanna beat us in transition? Here, let's make it as easy as possible. Let's send 3 forwards in deep so that we have, the center's not hanging back at all to maybe help out the defense. Oh, by the way, let's also at times just have one of our defensemen pinch up as well. Like, that sounds like a good idea. Let's not have the defenseman kind of play towards center of the ice at all either. Let's make sure they're as close to the boards as possible just to make a nice open runway for Vegas there. And then on top of it, anytime the puck was in the neutral zone, they had no idea what to do with it. And this is a problem that goes back to last year. Zone entries. Why are we still talking about this? I thought that was something that they had finally fixed, but they had no clear way of entering the Vegas zone. They were turning the puck over in the neutral zone. Again, the defensemen were making bad passes in the neutral zone to try to lead to zone entries, but they were doing it all along the boards, and then they're out of position for once the turnover happens. It was just, yeah, it was just kind of mind numbing at some point. Like you just were like, okay, yeah, this is inevitable. It's just what's happening. I'm not even going to try to keep up with it and try to figure out what's going on, or even, I'm going to stop talking about what they need to do to fix it because it's not helping. Like, I'm not speaking it into existence. I'm literally just wasting breath. And then, you take penalties because you're taking, you're having to come back and try to grab guys from behind because they're off on all these breakaways, or you're just getting frustrated by what the situation is, and instead of using that frustration, channeling it, like top athletes are able to do, this team just kind of let it get the best of them, and they just kept spiraling downwards, and at no point did anybody really kind of do anything that was going to put a stop to that. They just had to wait out the period. Now, kind of, again, something we didn't see too much last season is after they would have had two periods like this, where you see a couple early goals, you look terrible there, you look terrible all through the second period, you're just handing them the puck on a silver platter, all that stuff. Seattle does get their act together for the third period, and they do kind of mount a comeback. I mean, obviously the game finishes 5-2, so it wasn't like a great comeback attempt or anything, but they looked really strong in the third period. They were able to get a couple goals, and to be honest, I think some of that momentum would have kept going. They might have been able to get another one or two if Yanni Gourde doesn't take a pretty brutal penalty with about 3 minutes left in that game, just kind of killing all the momentum they were trying to build there just to finish out this game and try to build something positive moving forward. So that was at least nice to see. They didn't have any give up in them for that third period. They did come out, they made adjustments. Now it's also fair to wonder how much of that is Vegas just kind of sitting back because they've only got to kill 20 minutes of clock with a 5-0 lead. I think that's that does deserve to be mentioned. But you get, Justin Schultz, who I was saying on Twitter, I think he's kind of the team MVP so far this season. He gets his first goal as a Kraken. Jaden Schwartz is able to pick up his second of the season on the power play, keep the power play goal streak alive to start the season. Those are positive developments because last year when we saw the Kraken play these kinds of really brutal games, they didn't have any moments of that, and at least in this one there was some moments where, hey, we can still put points on the board, and that's something.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for that. Getting things right, even if it is too little too late. But still, the ultimate takeaway has to just be the game was lost at that point, and going back and correcting and just making sure that you start better, and it doesn't get to that point where even that, a 2-goal effort, a +2 effort in the third period, isn't enough.
Yeah, no, but again, this is something that, like, the final script for that won't be known until tonight, right, against Carolina, because that's
We'll
one of
find out
those
a lot.
things
Yeah.
of you're just trying to build something positive for the next game. That was just something that was missing last year, and that's something that was, something we talked about a lot last year, the fact that that was missing, that there was games that when they were down, you never felt like they had any chance of ever getting back into it, and that was one of the things that frustrated so many people. So it's one of those, I'm trying, because it's so early in the season, to find the bright spots to look at and try to highlight for everybody, because the bottom line is the Kraken, they do still have 3 points in the standings. They're still technically in the playoff spot. They've literally only lost one game in regulation. It hasn't even been a full calendar week since the season started. So I'm just trying not to have everybody spiral down too much. But yes, this game was really, really difficult in a lot of ways. They did out-hit Vegas, though. That plan worked. Congratulations. 35%
Good job.
35% of the face-off dot, though. That's brutal. And
that's another something to talk about.
I was going to say, worth noting, Kraken have not been above 50% yet this season.
It's been an issue.
Definite.
Suffice to say, it's been an issue.
Definite issue. And that's with RJ, 18-year-old Shane Wright, trying to play his first ever NHL action, only having played like 6.5 minutes so far. Right? Because you could argue, well, maybe that's what's going on with some of these face-offs is you got a young centerman in there. They're definitely not known for being able to win draws in this league. None of them have been, outside of Morgan Geekie for whatever reason. And so, maybe that's what's explaining it. But no, we had Shane Wright scratched for the Kings game and then scratched again for the Vegas game. And that surprised a lot of people. I think also some people maybe weren't totally surprised after he only played the 6 minutes and some change in that first Ducks game. But I mean, what are we feeling about the Shane Wright thing? Because I was trying to defend it on Twitter during that Kings game, And the idea of, look, I'm assuming that this was a plan. I think the game plan against the Kings was very much to be physical and do all the stuff we talked about earlier. And, are you going to have an 18-year-old playing in his second ever game after he just played in his first game the night before, and you're trying to execute this very specific game plan? Like, does it make sense to have him do that? And it didn't, right? And Hakstol kind of alluded to that after the game. Like, look, we wanted Morgan Geeky in there for this game. We kind of had this plan. That's what we did. So that all made sense to me. I thought though he would come back for that game against Vegas. And I tried to defend it on Discord earlier in the day. Like, look, it's Vegas. It's a tough team. Maybe you don't want him kind of thrown to the wolves against them, so to speak. But after watching how the rest of the team played, like, forget it. He might as well have been in there. You might as well have given him 20 minutes. Just get as much experience as possible.
Exactly. It would have been the perfect game for Shane Wright to get into, knowing with hindsight how it turned out. And I'm with you on the strategy for the Kings game. It all made sense, certainly after seeing how that game went, that Shane Wright was in the lineup. You want a bigger Morgan Geeky for that game. But and he's healthy scratch now for 2 games in a row, it does raise the question, what is the plan with Shane Wright? And it's something that Dave Hakstol, of course, was asked about. I mean, how could he not have been? And he said there is a plan. He
Mm-hmm.
alluded to there's a plan. We have a plan to get him into some real positive games. And I think he pointed at like positive games, positive starts, getting into good positions basically. And he said we have a plan too, kind of hinting that it's not just him, it's an organizational plan. I would have to imagine Ron Francis is involved in that as well. And I guess maybe they viewed those 2 games as not the right moments to get him into, not the right spots they want to put him in. I think there's still some kind of protecting they want to do. But still, we've yet to see exactly what the plan is. And of course, they're not going to just flat out tell us. So it's something we kind of have to find out on our own. But Dylan, I mean, what do you think the plan is? Do you think it's a good idea, to have this plan?
Yeah,
What do you think about this whole thing?
it's really really tough, and because Shane Wright, I talked about it all through the pre-draft process. I felt like Shane Wright was the most NHL ready of any of the prospects, any of those top of the board prospects. So he was NHL ready. Did it make sense to have him on our team when we have kind of depth? It's not like, it's not superstar level depth, but there was depth still left over from the expansion draft process. How was he going to fit in? I said at draft night, like 5 minutes after they drafted him, look, if he's going to be your fourth line center, don't keep him around, right? It's not going to be what's best for his development. He needs minutes. It would be better to send him back to Kingston. However, after seeing him at dev camp, after seeing him through the preseason training camp, all of that stuff, I don't know that going back to a Kingston team that right now is winning games, but they're also in the bottom third in the OHL in scoring, and he's not going to really be playing with NHL level prospects. I don't know that going back to Kingston would really do him all that much good. He'd go back and he'd either do what he did last year, where he's just going to focus on being two-way and focus on defense and whatever, or he'd just go whatever. I'm pissed off because everybody passed on me in the draft because they felt like I wasn't there offensively. I'm just going to drop 150 points on this league, and that'll be that. I don't think either of those two things really help him become a better NHL player or make him more ready to contribute next season. So I don't know that there's a lot of positives to sending him back either. But yes, it's clear that, he is an 18-year-old. He's an 18-year-old that they're committed to having at center, which, you know what I mean? Like, they're not going to flex him to the wing. A lot of times you'll see guys flex to the wing for their 18-year-old season just to get used to the NHL. It's pace of play, how physical it is, just how rigorous the schedule is. It's clear that they don't want to do that. They've made that determination. And I again agree with that, but it leaves him stuck in this no man's land of he doesn't quite feel good enough to crack the lineup, at least certainly not on certain nights or against certain teams or when the game plan is XYZ. But at the same time, you don't feel like you're really doing him a service and doing the franchise a service by sending him back to junior either. And so, as long as the plan doesn't involve him being scratched for like half the year, which I really doubt it is. I think this is just an early season thing and it was a very game by game decision here at the beginning. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with letting the plan just be, look, we're gonna spot start him to start. We're gonna let him get used to everything, let him get acclimated, let him work in practice every day against our NHL guys. And then over the course of the year, once we're like 20 games into the season, he'll be an everyday starter. I'm okay with that plan, and I think that's probably what the plan is based on everything we've heard from them. But yes, it was a big deal, I think, for me and for a lot of people to hear that this is an organizational plan, not just Hakstol like doing this. And maybe him and Ron Francis aren't on the same page, where Ron Francis wants Shane Wright up here and Hakstol's, coaching for his job, so he doesn't want the 18-year-old liability in the lineup. It's very clear that that is not the case. That was made clear yesterday. I'm very, very happy about that. And I do think that Shane Wright's going to look better moving forward, and I think that that could very easily start tonight against Carolina, a team that we highlighted doesn't quite have the same depth, especially down the middle, anymore that they've had in years past. I think this is a good chance for him to come in. We don't know which goaltender is going to start either, but how about this, RJ? Maybe Shane Wright is just tied to Philip Grubauer. We've
So
only
that some,
we've only
I
seen him in the game Grubauer started. Maybe there's something there.
maybe I cannot for life of me figure out what it would be, but maybe there is something there. Yeah, but seriously, I think it's not time to ring alarm bells on the Shane Wright situation yet. Um, I agree with pretty much everything you said about being okay with kind of easing him in, and by maybe the 20 game mark, kind of getting him to more of a regular spot. Yeah, as far as sending him back to junior, in Kingston, and I kind of trust your word on this because I didn't really think about this until I talked with you about it. That maybe that's not the best situation for him, and I think you even floated the idea of maybe they're trying to kind of engineer a trade in an OHL trade behind the scenes and get him on a team with a little more star power in a better situation for him. I haven't heard anything that would suggest that that's the case, but it's the kind of thing that after the fact would make a lot of sense and be a very hockey thing to have happened.
Yes.
That if you know what I mean. Um, but yeah, and maybe something like that could still be in the cards potentially. But it was great to hear that there is a plan from Dave Hakstol because I know there was a lot of kind of freaking out, not just here but in the hockey world. We saw a lot of reaction from fans in other fan bases too. Montreal and Philly are the two that I'm really
Mm-hmm.
thinking of. Flyers fans like, oh look, Hakstol's doing this again. I remembering times where maybe there were some younger players that he didn't play in Philadelphia that still has stuck with some Flyers fans. And then Montreal, which actually this was a nice little kind of change of pace instead of the look, see how much Shane Wright sucks, haha. We were actually kind of getting like, oh no, this Hackstall's like Dom Ducharme, and he's ruining this young kid's career, which is, it's an improvement from, I guess, the kind of comments we were getting,
Yeah.
over training camp and the preseason. But still, there was a lot of that kind of talk. But I think, Hackstall's answer at least implies that there is a plan there with the organization with Ron Francis. So we'll kind of have to see how that plays out. And yeah, we're recording this right before morning skate of
Mm-hmm.
that Carolina game, so we don't know who's in, who's out, what the line rushes are. But you have to imagine that would be one of these kind of positive starts for him, a good spot to put him in. I think you know maybe there's a little bit more questioning to go on if he doesn't end up playing tonight. Or because you'd think at some point, I think if not tonight, then when? The next game's
Right.
against the St. Louis Blues. They're another physical team. I could see you wanting to protect him from. And I know the schedule lightens up a little bit after that, but at a certain point, you just have to get him into at least one game, you'd think.
Right, and ideally you'd like to maybe not do like a every other kind of game either. Like at some point he's going to need to find a rhythm. You know what I mean? That's going to be big. I do think though, the bottom line is even in a game against the Blues, let's say, they play him tonight and things look okay, I'm not even saying like he goes out and he like scores a goal or anything. Even a game against the Blues, yes, they're a physical team and stuff, but if he's going to be bottom six paired against bottom six, I don't know that the Blues right now, bottom six, is kind of the Blues bottom six of old. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like it's not like he's gonna have to go up against Ryan O'Reilly. Just like tonight, he's probably not gonna be, if he plays, gonna be matched up against Jordan Stahl and just left to be like eaten alive by this experienced guy who's just gonna manhandle him up and down the ice, right? Like that is something that does need to be remembered too. Is we're talking about him being on the potentially just the fourth line for now. He's only going to be seeing what 8 minutes, 8-10 minutes a night, best case scenario in those situations, and it's going to be against basic literally the worst people the other team has. So that is something also to remember as far as you know. I guess I would also remind Hakstol and the Kraken, like, go ahead and get him in games. Let him play against the worst that these other teams have to offer, because especially at home, you control that last change. You're controlling exactly who he's going out there against. So I guess I would just kind of float that out and let the universe listen to that for a moment, if possible. um, but yes, I think getting him back in is a good idea. We can kind of talk. We can kind of like transition from this into the potential shuffling of lines based on what we saw yesterday, and obviously after that Vegas game, it would make a lot of sense to maybe put things in a blender a little bit. But it looked like Shane Wright playing between McCann and Gord, which, again, makes sense. Stick him with some more experienced guys there. Both guys that can flex into center if you need them to, I don't know, take a face off for him, or just, cover a defensive assignment, maybe even.
Right, that line very interesting to me because you have basically three guys who can all play center on that line, and I think it is worth mentioning too. These line combos get very different than what we'd seen previously. Um, Brandon Tanev and Jaden Schwartz were both out of practice yesterday. Maintenance days for both. You have to assume they'll both be back in the lineup tonight. They
Yeah.
they should be. And I'm trying to look at this lineup and see, okay, where do they go? Kind of where are the placeholders? Wenberg, Bjorkstrand, and I believe Schwartz was with them. So Carson Kuhlman, I think he's kind of the placeholder there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but looking at it, I could see that McCann, Wright, Gore line staying together, and then maybe like a Tanev going onto a fourth line with maybe Geeky or Sprong, Donato, something like that. Um, I think it's a good spot for Shane Wright, and it's similar to what they did pretty much all of training camp in the preseason. That's one thing that was really confusing with me on the Shane Wright front, is that we didn't see him on the fourth line or in a position to be a scratch all preseason, all training camp. They were consistently putting him in that 3C role and putting him with players like Jaden Schwartz, with Jordan Eberle, Jared McCann. We were seeing him always with NHL regulars, with very good players, kind of putting him in that higher position to succeed and surrounding him with talent. And then all of a sudden, you get to the line rushes right ahead of the first game, and he's on the fourth line, and then that's where he plays 6 minutes, and then he's a scratch for the next two games. So it's not what we saw at all during training camp or preseason, which is another reason it kind of threw me off. I think threw a lot of people off. But now, at least according to these line rushes, we'll see what we get later this morning. He is back in that spot that I really liked for him all
Mm-hmm.
through training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder if the plan was really, hey, we're gonna hold him out for maybe 5 or 6 games, and then we'll start getting him into action. But they decided, you know what, let's go ahead and start him opening night, just so that there isn't like a media firestorm about it or whatever. And it's a really, it's a Ducks team that's not very good. We'll just limit his minutes, get him in there for that game, then we'll have him out for a couple games. Or was the plan all along to maybe start him in that Vegas game, but because of how well that plan worked against the Kings and how well the team played against the Kings, everybody just decided, hey, you know what? Let's try to run that back with that lineup, with that goaltender, with that game plan, and let's see if we can maybe steal one here at home for the home opener against a good Vegas team. And they kind of made that change on the fly, and that's why Shane Wright then wasn't involved in that game. It would be very interesting to know which of those two kind of things it is, because I could easily see both of them being the case. But you're right, it didn't make sense. The situation he was in for that Ducks game didn't make sense at all based on what they were doing and really what traditionally has been proven best for young players either. Neither of those things made sense with what we saw. So that's why I'm really hopeful that today against Carolina we'll see him in a 3C role with some veterans around him. I just think that's going to be what's best for him. And then you're just going to have to kind of set him and forget him there. Let him develop, let him get game reps in, and kind of reevaluate after, 4 or 5 games what's going on. I think his line mates should be kind of untouchable. Like maybe shift things
Mhm.
in this game if it just really looks bad. But otherwise, I think that line should kind of remain untouched while you just get him used to everything. At least that's what I would do, which guarantees it
Yeah.
won't happen.
Yeah, we know how that goes, don't we?
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about the lines and everything is I really feel like Bjorkstrand's doing a fantastic job 5-on-5 at generating offense for himself. But I haven't felt like he's really connected with Wenberg and really whoever then is also on that line. That's one that I was kind of surprised to see yesterday at practice. Those two guys were still together because I just feel like they're not on the same page really at all.
It's looked like that during the regular season. They had some good chemistry kind of in that final tune-up preseason game, and toward the end of the preseason, it looked like that chemistry was there. I haven't really seen it so much, in the regular season. I think in game one they looked pretty good in Anaheim, but I mean, who didn't? For that long stretch,
Yes.
who didn't? Like
Right.
every line was generating a ton of chances, and I think it's just because the entire team was rolling. It is something I think they need to start thinking about because Oliver Bjorkstrand, he's so versatile. You can put
Mm-hmm.
him anywhere. He can be a part of any line just seamlessly and add to it. But I do think that Wenberg Bjorkstrand pair is one that Hakstol does seem kind of attached to. That's one of the two, kind of pairs of guys that we've seen, just tied to each other, and then the other one being Matty Beniers and Andre Burakovsky. But it's tough because when you're playing Burakovsky at that right wing spot and he's attached to Beniers,
Mm-hmm.
Bjorkstrand attached to Wenberg, where else do you go with that if, especially if Yanni Gord is playing wing? Yeah, I mean, you could put him with Shane Wright, and I think that might actually be a good idea.
Yeah.
But it kind of limits the spaces that he can go in this lineup when everyone's healthy.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. I look at Matty Beniers and his style of play, and I look at Bjorkstrand and his style of play, and these are both guys that like to make decisions and make their placement on the ice, all that off the cuff, as they're just reading and reacting to defenses, and they're just going with what their gut feel is for how the game is going. And I just can't help but think the two of them together would just be incredible. There would be nights where they're just like kind of both off and maybe one's not reading right. That would happen for sure. But when it would click, I mean, that would be a duo that could put up 100 points together just because they're just that kind of way. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Hmm. Well, then
Maybe.
let me ask you this then. So you think that's better than going, Burakovsky, Beniers, and then like and then where would you put Burakovsky? Because that's again what I can't figure out. And he's been better now that the regular season has
Yes.
started. I talked about him having kind of a slow training camp. He has absolutely sped up. I mean, what would you do with Andre Burakovsky then?
I would stick him with Wenberg because right now what one of the things that's been impressive to me with Burakovsky so far this season is his willingness to shoot. And so, who better to pair him with than a guy who refuses to shoot in Alexander Wenberg, right? Wenberg will just feed him the puck. He might feed it to his skates, but he'll feed Burakovsky the puck, and Burakovsky can get some shots off on the right side. I feel like Burakovsky likes to distribute from the left and shoot from the right. That's kind of the sense I'm getting as we're watching him in different situations on the power play 5-on-5, as we went through the preseason and stuff. That's the feel I'm getting. I'd be really curious to ask like people who covered him in Colorado or something if that's the case. But that's kind of what I've been noticing. So if he's going to be sticking on the right side, I'd rather pair him with a Wenberg. Wenberg tends to drift to the left pretty much all the time anyway. When he's 5-on-5, he likes to be on that left side of the net. So yeah, that's what I would do, and I would see if that works because right now having somebody like Bjorkstrand who if he's feeling that he needs to be a playmaker in a certain situation, or he's going to make a move that's going to draw in defenders, and then he's making a pass over to Wenberg, only for Wenberg to then make another pass, you're kind of wasting that effort from Bjorkstrand there. And I don't know. I just don't like that pairing. I just want to see anything but that. That's I don't care what change happens.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Burakovsky was on Wenberg's wing in the preseason, didn't work well, but he was on his left wing. So
Right.
I maybe it would work better on the right.
Yeah, if he's going to shoot from the right, then stick him on the right with Wenberg. Let them feed each other. Otherwise, everybody's playing basically like we thought they would, right? Like, certainly all the returning members of the squad, everybody's kind of just doing their thing. Everly looks like Everly, McCann looks like McCann, Donato looks like Donato. You know, you could really just go through the lineup. I think Yanni Gord's starting to heat up a little bit. He's had a really rough start to the season so far. I haven't totally liked what he's been doing, especially 5-on-5. I just feel like there's just nothing there. Like you didn't notice him at all in the Ducks game. It's like he didn't exist, which is great if he's out there trying to shut down some other team's top line. If it's he's trying to take advantage of the terrible depth the Ducks have, probably wish, we noticed him a little bit.
Yeah, no, I would like to see more from Yanni Gord, and I think we talked about this a little bit, on post game the other day on that line with Brandon Tanev and then Jordan Eberle, which doesn't
It's a
make a
weird
ton of
line.
sense to me. It is a weird line, and because I know that Yanni Gord prefers playing with kind of straight line,
Hmm.
as he calls it, predictable players,
Yeah.
that are just going to be north south and play that speed game. Guys like a Brandon Tanev or a Carson Kuhlman,
Hmm.
but yeah, Eberle just didn't seem like a fit on that line, and I think he was just kind of thrown there because he was the guy left over from the other pairings that Hakstol wanted. So. Yeah, I could see maybe some changes there that might benefit Yanni Gord. I mean, we'll see how how he is on the right wing with Shane Wright. That's a different kind of spot for him. Uh, but yeah, and if that's where he stays, we'll see. But yeah, I think he just needs to settle in with some line mates that work with how he plays. And I think he's kind of being used as this utility piece to help out in different areas where they need it. Which that's an important role, obviously, to kind of solidify things, but it makes it tougher to get your own game going.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it, a lot remains to be seen. Like you said, obviously, Schwartz. We all know the injury history there. I have no problem with him having maintenance days. Tanev coming off his injury, no problem with him having maintenance days. So we'll see what the lines look like in a little bit once you head off to morning skate there. Kind of just to loop back around during the Shane Wright discussion and through this, we talked about the idea of, or I floated the idea of maybe what happened was after that Kings game, that lineup and that game plan worked, so they tried to recreate it against Vegas. And that brings up something else that was really talked about both before and after the Vegas game for different reasons. Beforehand about Shane Wright, afterwards about the idea of starting Martin Jones. But is Hackstall kind of coaching? Some people were using the word desperate. I don't know that I'd use desperate, but is he coaching with his job security in mind? Maybe. You know what I mean? And he was trying to string together some wins to start the season. And, hey, this thing worked last time. Let's try to run it back, even though this game plan doesn't work against this team at all. And his post game comments kind of hinted that he would have known that. So I don't know that that's the case. I'm interested to hear your take on it. And then I can kind of give what I think really is happening.
Okay, well, it's a bold move, certainly, and it's something that we recognized during morning skate when we saw what the lineup was going to be. Uh, yeah, it's a bold move and something that I think is uncharacteristic from him.
Hmm.
Something that we would not have seen last season.
Yeah.
Even when things were going as bad as they were going, he stuck with his guys. He was resistant to make any of those big changes where you wouldn't think a coach would start or would sit Philip Grubauer, your clear starter in the home opener. So it was just something different from him, and again, it's hard for me to blame a coach that was just coming off as good of a game as they had against the Kings, and wanted to just say, hey, let's not change a thing. We
Hmm.
played so well. Let's stick with it. Let's run it back. It's easy in hindsight to look back at that and be like, oh, how did you not get their game plan and everything? And Martin Jones against Vegas, oh my God, the energy, like just the vibes alone mean you're going to let in a couple goals in the first few minutes. That's just how it works. But again, I can't point to anything concrete there, but it always seems to happen.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to fault him there. and because I think also, excuse me, I think with that lineup, it was still a winnable game. I don't think that was or with Martin Jones in net, I don't think that was a death sentence.
Mhm.
It's just tactically adjusting the way that Vegas is, that Vegas is going to play. I think you can, with that lineup, match up well against it. Um, I don't think that's what it is. Um, I don't know. I think, I mean, the question is he coaching desperate? Is he coaching differently because
Right.
he feels like his job security might be on the line? Um, he's coaching differently. I couldn't tell you why.
Yeah.
Maybe he's coaching differently because things went so poorly last season. You're like, well, given those results, maybe I should coach differently.
Right.
Maybe I should try something else. Maybe I should ride the hot hand in net. I'm interested to hear what you think is going on because I don't really have an answer for this. I just think that, yeah, he was coaching differently there, and clearly it didn't work out. But you can kind of, I don't know,
Yeah.
you can justify it, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
go ahead. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, so I think that's the most likely outcome. I'll float too, but I'm saying right now, I very much think that the most likely outcome was just, hey, we got 3 out of 4 playing back-to-back games against divisional opponents. We looked really, really good against that Kings team. They weren't ever really able to do what they wanted to do. And so everybody just felt like, hey, you know what? Let's just kind of try that again. Let's see if we could do that. Let's see if that idea works against this Vegas team. And, even though we know that there might be some issues, everybody felt confident that if they executed, it would be okay. Obviously, they didn't execute well. That was clear 12 seconds into the game. But at that point, it's a little late to then try to shake things up, right? It's really, you burn your timeout 12 seconds in to be like, guys, let me in 30 seconds draw something up on the board, and we'll try to change everything that we were preparing to do all day long. I think that's the most likely outcome, was just everybody was feeling good. They just wanted to keep some positive momentum and start the season strong after what it was last year, because there's a million reasons to do that. And that's also the transition into where I'll provide my second option. And this is definitely the more YouTubery clickbait. Let's build a fun thumbnail around this idea. And that's,
Say, let me get working on the
I
thumbnail.
was going to say, and that's that maybe the organization, and I don't mean Ron Francis when I say the organization, I mean the business side of the organization, was maybe pushing more so for that idea of, let's start the season off strong. Hey, that really worked against the Kings. We're looking good. Let's go ahead and try to do stuff like that. Again, I don't think that's what happened, but you could also maybe I could also see a world where they come back to Seattle, and walking into the offices and everything, people in certain powerful positions are making, joking suggestions about, hey, Jones looked really good in that game. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we should start him for the home opener, right? Like, you know how top executive people are. They like to do that in a way where it's like, hey, I'm kind of telling you maybe what to do with your job, but I'm not really totally telling you what to do with your job. But we both know that who's actually in power here. You know what I mean? And I very much believe that executives in every single organization, in every single business communicate that way, just because that's in the manual, I guess. So I don't know. Maybe there was some elements of that, of coming back to Seattle, everybody being like, "Hey, wow," the non-hockey people or whatever, and they were just like, "Wow, we look like a playoff team. We're scoring power play goals. All the new additions worked. Like, we should just totally run it back." Like, if you were to leave business people in charge, that's exactly what would have the what we saw is exactly the outcome that would have happened in that scenario. And so that's why I'm even saying it, is because it felt very, you know what I mean? Like, it felt like that it's the outcome you'd expect from non-hockey people making the decision. So I'm floating it out there just cause.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, might as well. I mean, like, of course, reporter journalist me is just like, hang on, like, disclaimer, I've seen nothing that would suggest that
Yes,
this is the
exactly.
case.
I know.
Um, but we don't see what's going on, behind the scenes. And I mean, there's probably some element of that in any kind of business, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, certainly this early in the season, it's Hakstol's
Because
call, and that's the most likely outcome.
yeah, it's just outside of him just not, thinking that they could run back that strategy. I just see no other reason for Jones. That's the key thing. It's one thing if you leave Shane Wright out of the lineup, but you're at least going back to Grubauer. The fact that they start Martin Jones for the home opener after an entire offseason of really so much focus being on bringing in a new goaltending coach. Let's get Philip Grubauer right. He is our starter. All of that stuff. To move away from that only 2 games in is unusual to say the least in hockey. And so out the only 2 things I can think of is either it wasn't hockey people making that decision, or more likely it was just they played so well against the Kings. They maybe got a little ahead of themselves, a little full of themselves, and thought they could do that against a Vegas team that kind of knows how to exploit it.
Hmm. And I think for that one, you can also maybe point to desperation. If you're thinking if this is a coach who is worried about job security, and the reason one of not the reason one of the big reasons that you're in a position where you're worried about job security, and we've seen this not just on this team but on countless teams over countless years, was goaltending. And
Yes.
and we kind of know which goaltender, well, it was both, but we know which goaltender it was more of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that maybe over an off season starts to seep into your mind just a little bit.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when the call is yours and the job potentially on the line might be yours, maybe that gets into your decision making a little bit.
Yeah, and that goes into larger things. I would have thought that over the off season, the conversations, it seemed clear to me during like exit interview time last year, Hextall's the guy, and he's outside of like just true disaster to start this season, he's gonna be the guy through this season. I think after that,
Okay.
it's worth looking at things, and that they would reevaluate. But I very much got the sense that look, we're not going to be like, ooh, if we're not in playoff position by December, we're going to try to make a move to try to make that happen. That just wasn't the sense that I got from anything Ron Francis was saying. So I'm assuming that those conversations were had, assuming that that is how the organization feels, then I would assume, and these are a lot of assumptions, I understand that, everybody, that Hextall
Mhm.
understands that and knows that, you know, being 1-1-1 to start a season with this club is not enough to start coaching desperate and trying to salvage your job and coach day to day like that. It just feels way too early for it, especially given the fact that after those first 2 games, they took 3 out of 4 points, which I can't. The Vegas game was so bad that we've completely lost sight of that fact. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean it's we got to remember back to like the post game after the Kings game and how great everyone was feeling. And I should mention, we got at least 20 chat thing messages in chat saying make Martin Jones the starter. Start
Yes.
Martin Jones next game. It's definitely something that a lot of people were thinking. It didn't just kind of come out of thin air. Yeah, there was just that optimism too. By the way, I just got news that today's morning skate will be optional. It's an optional skate, so we probably won't
Interesting.
learn the lines until much closer to game time, everyone. Just a little heads up if you're listening to this midday here. Um, but yeah, so I think that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We might not have that Shane Wright call until warm-ups, really,
Yeah.
that we see it. So yeah, stay tuned on that one.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. When it comes to the goaltending decision, if you like it or not, Grubauer is going to be a Kraken goaltender for a while. So it seems like it's in the best case of everyone involved if really try to make him work as the starter. And so
Mhm.
that's why I don't like the whole like, hey, we should be going with Jones because he played one good game kind of thing. Like I certainly don't think that. And and then it's easy to defend Jones after the Vegas game too because he was just hung out to dry completely. So I don't know. I just think it's imperative that if this team is ever going to go anywhere, playoff wise, have any sort of success, Philip Grubauer is going to have to be a part of it. And that means getting him right, getting him reps, getting him comfortable, building back his confidence. And I just don't know that transitioning or making this more of an even split and doing all of that stuff is the best way to do that so early in a season.
Right. I agree with you. I just think that one way or another, like you said, he's going to be the starting goalie. This
Yeah.
team is going to go as Philip Grubauer goes, for better or for worse, given that contract. You have to get him right. And things were going so well in the
Mm-hmm.
preseason and everything too. He had a fantastic preseason.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to just kind of give up on that after one game.
Right.
It's puzzling to me.
Right. And that's why I was so confused as to him not starting at home for the home opener. So we'll see. I got to assume it's gonna start tonight. Like I would just
He has to.
has
He
to.
has to. I would be shocked if he did not.
Yeah. So we'll see there, and that's just gonna be like a developing thing. I think both the Hakstol thing and the goaltending and really Shane Wright, they're developing stories. Hey, stick with us for all the latest news and updates.
Yeah, and of course, let us know what you think about this stuff because
Yes.
I'm really interested for feedback from everyone. And put them in the comments. Like what do you think of the handling of Shane Wright? Because I think there's room for a lot of good debate there, a lot
Yep.
of different opinions to be had. We have our takes, but I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of other
Yeah.
legitimate opinions there. And then same thing with the goaltending. Goaltending is weird. It's crazy. It's unpredictable. What do you think they should do? Because there's no just one right answer.
I was gonna say after my fantasy team's first performance this week, I don't think I'm in any way qualified to be talking about goaltending.
Good point. I mean, who is really? Who
Yeah,
is?
exactly. All right, so I want to finish off this podcast, RJ, talking about the Firebirds. Got their first ever game in. Congratulations to them. Picked up a W in their first ever game. That's also always fun, even if there was a little bit of nail biting there at the end.
Yeah, how about that?
Hey, everybody, let us know. Does this sound like a team within the Kraken organization, a team that would win 6-5 after having, building up a pretty solid lead at one point?
No, I was checking in on the score updates and I was like, I saw the 6-5 goal. I'm like, wait a second, wasn't it like 5-0 5?
It was
What
five
happened?
one at some point, yes, in
Five
the second
one, and
period.
I just
Halfway through the game, it was 5-1.
of course as I saw that, I just assumed, oh, it's 6-5 Calgary because of course, but they got it done. You know what I think the difference was
Cole
and why
Lind.
they hung on?
Cole Lind, goalie kisses?
See, that's the answer that makes sense on paper, but
Oh,
no,
okay.
it's that why they got it done and the Kraken were not able to get it done in their first game. 'Cause the Kraken played in a close one, they lost by one goal, and no,
Yeah,
and I mean, yeah, the Stevenson kick. It's that they had a mascot going into opening night.
that's
It's
true.
that little bit extra that just willed them to hang on. It's
Fuego.
Fuego.
It was all Fuego. I'd buy that all day long. But yes, they get the W for their first ever game. I mentioned Cole Lind. He had 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists. Fantastic start to the season for Cole Lind. Um, I guess one of the things that I was looking at the box score before we recorded, RJ, just kind of refreshing
Mm.
on things, and I looked at the penalties and we were talking about that. John Hayden, somebody we talked about when it was coming down to final cuts, picked up 8 minutes of penalties. He took two penalties that then he also then ended up taking roughing penalties with offsetting from the other side. So I'm very curious as to what that all looked like with everybody. That happened a couple times elsewhere. But just want to mention Riker Evans. 1 game, 1 point. Let's go.
Yeah, good start for him. And I mean, this is the plan, right? Send him down to the AHL, have him get some good games in there, some good reps in, and eventually work his way to being ready to be called up to the NHL at some point. So I think a good start for a lot of those guys. Cole Lind, a great start for him, and someone that we could easily see as a call up, when the Kraken needs somebody, because as we know with injuries, it's when, not if. So I think it's good knowing that he's there and thriving in the AHL. 4 points on his birthday, by the way. Happy 24th birthday to Cole Lind yesterday. I mean, when it's your birthday, you're just feeling it. You're feeling that energy. We know he's a good player. I think he could do it on other days, but when it's your birthday, it's something extra special.
Exactly. And Colin's +4. Obviously, the 4 points. A +4 in a game like this, where your team gives up 5, is impressive. And that was the other thing I wanted to mention with Riker Evans. +4 as a defenseman in a game where your team's giving up 5. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I don't have time on ice though. That's the one thing I wish was on this AHL website, was that, I could see
Oh, we
kind of
don't have ice time?
how everybody played, and because I'm curious like what kind of minutes Riker Evans was getting and stuff. I think that would be an interesting thing to know. So I'm gonna have to look at ways of doing that, because as I'm on this AHL website, RJ, I was telling you before we started recording,
Hmm.
website feels a little dated. Gonna say that.
Yeah, I'd say so. I went and checked it out after you mentioned it. Yeah, it may be stuck in the past just a little bit. But yeah, it'd be good to try and get some of those stats. I mean, they do keep official stats and everything from the AHL,
Yeah.
right? They've got the off-ice officials. They keep all those. All right, for the home game, for the games that'll be happening up here, I will like run over to the off-ice officials table and make sure I get you that ice time stat. I'll have them print me out a stat sheet. They're all very nice. I know they'll do that for me. So I'll make sure to do that for the games here.
Awesome. Sounds good. Really excited for those games there. I think that's going to be just so much fun. Uh, once
Yes.
we get that going. Yeah, what's interesting is they literally give you the start time and the end time of the game. It started at 1:06 p.m., ended at 3:42 p.m. for a 2 hour and 36-minute game. Give me that, but I can't see how many minutes Riker Evans played. Come on.
You just get the actual timestamps. Like from 1:35 p.m. to 1:36 p.m. he was on the ice.
Yes, and by the way, this is an inside reference, but yes, Mom, I looked like a mom would look. I went to his actual player profile page, which does have more stats, but it still doesn't have time on ice. So big thing, big
That's a
thing
good one.
growing up. Did you look like a mom would look when you're like, I can't find something? And looking like a mom would look, by the way, everybody, it's like moving things, actually like looking. It's not just like glancing around the room from a fixed position. It's like actually, searching for something.
Oh man, I could have used
what it
that
was
one
like.
growing up.
I know, that's what it was like growing up here. You didn't ask mom for help finding something until you looked like she would look. All right, that's a good way of ending this. A little nice, another little nice, a nice little life lesson to end the pod. Jeez, just got to get to this outro, man. Awesome. Like I said, it was a pod of firsts, talking about all the firsts. So excited the season's back. So excited the Kraken. They looked good through 2 games anyway. We can say that, and it's a good start from them. Thanks again to Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring the podcast and sponsoring everything. Really helping make ECH go this year. It's really, really awesome. Thanks to Jen for all the photos from that home opener that we got spread out throughout this podcast. And we're going to see you all next time.